Good afternoon and welcome to the Western Energy Markets Governing Body General Session meeting. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and all attendee lines are currently in a listen-only mode. There will be opportunities for public comment throughout today's call, at which point we will give you all instructions on how you can enter the comment queue. With that, I'll now go ahead and turn things over to Chair Rob Konzioka. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Well, welcome to today's November 6th, 2024 Governing Body General Session. Thank you for taking the time and to join us, to listen and participate. To get things started, I'm going to turn this over to Corporate Secretary Roger Clanton to do the roll call.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair Konzioka, and good afternoon, everybody. We'll start with you, Chair Konzioka.
I'm here.
Member Wagner.
Here.
Member Campbell.
Here.
Member Decker.
Here.
And Member Prescott.
Here.
Excellent. We have a quorum and a full complement of the governing body. We may proceed. Back to you, Chair Konzioka.
Thank you. Our first item of business is public comment. So if you have a public comment not related to one of the agenda items, this would be the time to do that. And Silas, if you could give instructions for anybody who would like to participate.
If you would like to make a public comment, please press the raise hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you are dialed into the phone only line, please press #2 on your telephone keypad to be entered into the comment queue. Not seeing any hands in the comment queue at this time.
Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 2, which is a decision on our previous meeting minutes. So Roger, turn that back over to you.
Thank you, Chair Konzioka. If I can have a motion from the governing body to approve the September 25th, 2024 WEM Governing Body General Session minutes.
So moved.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm sorry, who was second?
John.
John, thank you, John. Nice tie, by the way.
Thank you, Rod.
And we'll take the vote. Chair Konzioka, your vote?
Aye.
Vice Chair Wagner?
Aye.
Member Campbell?
Aye.
Member Decker?
Aye.
And Member Prescott?
Aye.
Thank you, governing body. The motion passes. Back to you, Chair Konzioka.
Thank you. I'm going to be quite brief today, and I'd just like to have a slight reflection on last week regarding the symposium. For those of you who were not able to attend in person or watch the live stream, I highly recommend taking the time to watch the panels that were included as part of that symposium. I think you'll find it very inspiring, educational, and provide some great insights into the future of Western electricity markets. And, Elliot had covered some of this in his CEO report, which you have access to. But the panels were really high-powered and were quite frank. And I think that there's just a lot of takeaways you would have. So with that, I am going to turn it out over to CEO report, Elliot Mainzer.
Thank you, Chair Konzioka and members of the WEM governing body. I also would like to just emphasize that I really, first of all, really appreciated all of your attendance at the symposium. It was definitely a really outstanding event. Appreciated just over 950 people in person and several hundred more online. And as you mentioned, the panels were just outstanding. Great to hear of all of the progress on the part of the West-wide Independent Governance Pathways Initiative. Just so appreciative of all the work there by the launch committee members. Nice to hear from WAPA Administrator Tracy LeBeau about WAPA's intention to move towards an EDAM implementation agreement for their Sierra Nevada operation. And of course, that on the heels of the announcement by their large customer in the Desert Southwest, the AZGT, that they're going to be conducting a study on the benefits of moving from EIM into EDAM. So some great news, and just wonderful to spend so much quality time with so many members of the Western energy community. Of course, another major highlight of the symposium was our opportunity to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of the Western energy imbalance market. And here we are in November 2024, 10 years later, and with $6.25 billion of cumulative benefits. And I think now the experience of being able to work through some very challenging summer and winter conditions in recent years, I think the EIM clearly has exceeded all expectations when it was first put together a decade ago. So I would also note really nice video that our team put together that is available out there on our website as well, if you'd like to take a look at that. Just finally, one piece of business, just wanted to note just to reemphasize that back on October 15th, we did file tariff modifications with FERC to extend and enable interscheduling coordinator trading functionality to WEIM and EDAM once EDAM goes live in 2026. We're expecting a ruling on that from FERC by the end of the year. And as I noted in the C report, just making very, very good progress on implementation of EDAM with both Pacific Core and Portland General currently on track for PAC to go live in the spring of 2026 and Portland General in the fall of 2026. So just great progress on all fronts. Again, appreciate all your support, and thanks again to everybody who was able to join us last week in Sacramento. It concludes my report.
Elliot, thank you. I'm just going to do a quick check and see if any of the governing body members have any questions.
Good, thank you.
All right, thank you, Elliot. Our next agenda item is the Body of State Regulator update. And with us today to provide us the update is the BOSR Chair, Gabriel Aguilera. Gabriel is a commissioner with the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission. And Gabriel, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Kanzioka, Vice Chair Wagner, and members of the governing body. It's great to see you all today. And also to everybody, congratulations on 10 years of the WEIM. So since the BOSR's last update in September, the BOSR held its biannual in-person meeting in San Diego. It was great to see some of you there. Prior to the CREPC YREP conference in October, so our October meeting focused on several items. First, among other administrative items, we announced the unanimous approval of the BOSR's new chair and vice chair positions, and I will be serving as the chair of the BOSR, and Commissioner John Hammond of the Idaho Public Utilities Commission is the new BOSR vice chair, and will also be the BOSR representative to the WM governing body nominating committee. I'm sure at some point, if I'm unable to attend one of these meetings, you will see him here instead of me. I also want to take this opportunity to thank Chair Williamson of the Nevada PUC for her leadership of the BOSR over the past few years. She's been instrumental in leading the BOSR's efforts in the WEIM and EDAM, and we're very pleased to announce that she'll continue as a BOSR member as Nevada's representative. So October's meeting also included presentations from CAISO Management and the DMM. From CAISO Management, we received updates on the status of the WEIM benefits across the footprint, EDAM developments, the 2025 policy roadmap and catalog process, and ongoing and future policy initiatives, including the storage bid cost recovery issue on today's agenda, and price formation and congestion revenue rights enhancements. The DMM provided us with an update on trends in battery storage resource growth across the WEIM and highlighted their usage and bidding patterns in the CAISO BAA, as well as their interaction with market power mitigation and bid cost recovery. And on this topic of storage BCR, the BOSR appreciates the opportunity to provide comments on track 1 of the Storage Bid Cost Recovery and Default Energy Bid Enhancements Initiative to the governing body. The BOSR recognizes the importance of the strategic bidding issues raised in Track 1, particularly as we look toward the expansion of the day-ahead market and growth of storage resources across the current regional market footprint. As we expressed in our comments, the BOSR supports the interim solution proposed by CAISO to address the strategic bidding opportunities present in the current design of the BCR for storage resources. The BOSR recommends CAISO prioritize commencing a holistic review of BCR for storage resources aimed at addressing all of the efficiency, reliability, and strategic bidding concerns raised during the Track 1 initiative. So beyond the issue of storage BCR, the BOSR will also continue to monitor the working groups and policy initiatives that the membership has prioritized and provide feedback when it deems necessary. And finally, and more for the governing body's awareness, the BOSR has submitted comments to the Pathways Initiative Launch Committee on their Step 2 draft proposal. Our comments focused on the funding structure of the BOSR under the proposed RO regional organization. In the comments, we recommend to the launch committee that the RO BOSR funding shift from negotiated agreements with state regulated market participants to a tariff-based funding. The BOSR believes that incorporating funding into the RO tariff would be more appropriate for several reasons. First, it would provide a stable and consistent and predictable source of funding. And second, it would safeguard the BOSR's independence from external variable funding sources. Third, a tariff-based mechanism offers greater transparency and accountability, as the RO tariff would ultimately be subject to review and approval by FERC. And fourth, a tariff-based mechanism would bring the RO BOSR, in alignment with other public interest groups included in the Step 2 draft proposal, as well as state committees in other regional markets. So the BOSR continues to follow the progress by the Pathways Initiative and will provide input when it deems necessary. So this concludes my report for you all today. Do want to note that the BOSR's next meeting will take place virtually this Friday, November 8th. So on behalf of the BOSR, thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Chair Aguilera, thank you very much for this report. First of all, congratulations to both you and Commissioner Hammond on the new positions of Chair and Vice Chair of BOSR. We look forward to working with you and Commissioner Hammond. And as you noted, a big thank you to Chair Haley Williamson for the work she's done. We understand the commitment and the effort it takes to keep the BOSR moving and to provide us input, and it's greatly appreciated. And specifically, we appreciate the written comments that the BOSR has submitted on tomorrow's decisional item regarding the storage bid cost recovery. So with that, let's check and see if any of the governing body members have any questions or comments for you. Apparently none. So thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item is an update from the Regional Issues Forum. And with us today is the RIF chair, Meg McNull. And Meg is a partner with Thomas Coburn, LLP. She also represents 6 cities. So Meg, the floor is yours.
Thank you and good afternoon, Chair Kanzioka, Vice Chair Wagner, and members of the governing body. Thank you for the chance to provide an update today. Since my last update to the governing body at the September 25th meeting, the RIF has held 2 public meetings, the first of which was on September 27th, and we covered 2 topics there. First, we addressed the topic of congestion revenue rights, and that consisted of a panel facilitated by Scott Olson and Rahul Kalaskar, both of whom are sector liaisons from the IPP and marketing sector. The panelists focused on providing an overview of CRRs and an introduction to certain current issues relating to CRRs in the ISO administered markets. The second topic that we covered on the September 27th was a presentation by Milos Bosanak on behalf of the ISO, and he provided an overview facilitated by Ali Mace, who's the RIF Vice Chair, of the CAISO's efforts toward EDAM implementation, and it was a follow-on to some of the discussion that we had with representatives of Pacific Horn Bank during our June meeting that focused on EDAM implementation as well. And then our second meeting, since I last provided an update, took place just last week on October 29th, the day before the ISO's Stakeholder Symposium. We met and had 2 panels, the first of which was moderated by Lauren Tenney-Dennison, who is the sector liaison for the consumer-owned utility sector. She had a really wide-ranging discussion about different approaches to the ISO stakeholder process. It encompassed some thoughts from the ISO on changes that have recently been implemented and how that is going, as well as some suggestions by stakeholders regarding areas for further enhancement that could be considered. At the end of that discussion on the stakeholder process, Amelia Blanky provided an update on the ISO's policy initiatives catalog and roadmap process, both for 2024 and looking ahead to 2025. And then we turned to a second panel on CRRs, also again moderated by Scott Olson and Rahul Kalaskar. And this time, the focus of the conversation was on potential reforms to CRR-related policy. This was another in-depth panel discussion, and I think it provides a nice segue into the stakeholder process that the ISO, I understand, is kicking off next week, dealing with CRRs. And finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank you, Chair Kanzioka and Vice Chair Wagner, as well as CAISO Board of Governors Chair Jan Shorey, for your opening remarks at last week's RIF meeting. We really appreciated that. Turning to future activities, the RIF in the near term will be focusing on kicking off our process for the 2025 policy initiatives catalog and roadmap. And we will continue to keep the governing body apprised of how that process is going and our schedule for 2025 meetings. That concludes my update. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Chair McNall, thank you. Always an honor to be with the RIF, and I thought that the panel sessions were terrific. They were some very good learning experiences, and it was really good to see the turnout that you had at the meeting. So do any of the governing body members have any questions or comments for Chair McNall? Apparently none. So thank you very much. We appreciate the update. Moving on, we will now move on to agenda item 6, which is one of the favorite topics of everybody, which is the WEM benefits and market update. And to get us started, Anna McKenna will provide some introductions. And Anna is the Vice President, Market Design and Analysis. Anna?
Good afternoon, Chair Kanzioka, Vice Chair Wagner, and governing body members. Guillermo Bautista, our Director of Market Performance and Advanced Analytics, will have a presentation for you today, and he'll be going through that. With that, I'd like to transfer over to him.
Thank you, Anna, for the introduction. Chair Concioca, Vice Chair Wagner, members of the governing body, good afternoon, and thank you for having me. I'm here to provide an update on the economic benefits for the Western Energy Imbalance Market in the third quarter of this year. This briefing in particular is very interesting because it happens at the time where we have the 10th anniversary of the Western Energy Imbalance Market. The third quarter of this year had a total gross economic benefit of $395 million. The main drivers accruing these benefits are basically threefold. The first one is the large footprint covering a total of 23 balancing areas in the West. Participation of that many entities simply enable more economic transactions and leverage not only the geographic diversity, but also the timing and the generation diversity. The second factor is the high level of transfers that we continue to accrue in the market, and also the price at which they are transacted, because they will reflect the economics of the wider area. And the third item is the economics of the large footprint, given all the diversity that we have, to displace higher value energy. When an energy transfer is realized, a cheaper energy transfer effectively displaces more expensive generation that is going to the receiving area. This will lead to benefits in the way of cost savings for the receiving area. All these factors play a role throughout the quarter at different times, at different levels to accrue this level of economic benefits. Next slide, please. With the third quarter of $395 million, the total benefits since the inception of the Western Energy Imbalance Market is now at $6.25 billion. That is a good way to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Western Energy Imbalance Market. And this level of gross economic benefits reflects the value and actually the effectiveness of the market to be able to meet supply and demand at the least cost across a wide West footprint. This highlights the material economic benefits of participating in an organized, centralized balancing market. Next slide, please. Following on the transfers are a significant share of the benefits because they are the enablers of the economics of the Western Energy Imbalance Market by enabling access to lower cost supply. This illustration is quite familiar to you and simply reflects on the dynamics of the transfers that we have in the market. As a refresher, the thickness of each stream flow accounts for the volume of the transfers happening between the areas. The left-hand side represents the areas that are sending the power from, and the right-hand side represents the areas that are receiving the power to. And as you see, there are many stream flows, and that is indeed a reflection of how effectively a centralized market is able to find out and maximize all the potential permutations of these economic opportunities to balance supply and demand at the same time for all these 23 balancing areas. On the right-hand side, it is only a summary of the total volume of transfers in the quarter for both the imports and the exports. And you can see every single entity contributed to these economic transactions on either side of the transfers. Next slide, please. This illustration provides a glance over the evolution of the Western Energy Imbalance Market since its inception. This illustrates how the transfers have evolved as more areas are integrated into the market. It all started with a very moderate level of transfers when the market was launched back in 2014 in partnership with PAC. And since then, the transfers have quickly grown. In the upper part of the figure, there is a reference to show the point in time when the different balancing areas joined the Western Energy Imbalance Market and how that influenced the volumes of the transfers moving forward. It is interesting to observe the discrete increases in the volumes of the transfers when a new area was integrated into the market. As these areas are integrated, it created actually two effects. The first one is that there is now a more direct path to realize additional transfers between the new area and the existing areas. But also there is a secondary effect, and that is that the new area can now enable increasing transfers among existing areas. It means that now the new area can serve as a linkage, as a bridge between existing areas to unlock additional level of transfers. This is exactly how supply from one end of the market footprint is able to reach demand in the other end of the footprint, going from the Pacific Northwest to the desert Southwest in the summer and reversing transfers during the winter time frame. Next slide, please. Now we have the prices. Overall, prices trended down as the summer progressed, reaching more moderate levels towards the end of September. You all recall that July experienced sustained high temperatures with high loads in the West. Indeed, a record peak demand was reached for the Western interconnection. Therefore, it's expected that prices are going to reflect this high level of demand and tight supply conditions in the West. The illustration also shows as a reference the external power prices for the three hubs. We have as a reference the Mid-Sea hub that reflects the dynamics in the Northwest. And we also have the Palo Verde hub to reflect the dynamics of the Southwest. Overall, you can see that for the whole quarter, the bilateral prices trended higher than the Western energy imbalance real-time prices. Next slide, please. The last piece, this is about a program that was implemented last summer. We have the participation of the Western energy imbalance market in the Assistant Energy Transfers program. This is a feature that was developed to facilitate energy assistance by means of energy transfers to those entities that may be in the need for additional supply, but they may have failed any of the resource efficiency evaluation tests. An entity willing to participate in this program has to opt in advance, and then the market will be able to facilitate any additional transfers that is available during these periods of failures. In the third quarter of 2024, there were up to 10 different balancing areas that opted in for this program. They are represented with individual color boxes in the illustration. There is also a black dot when applicable, and they are for the days in which actually the entity that opted in indeed failed the resource efficiency evaluation. And therefore, these are the conditions in which the program can be beneficial for those entities. By looking at the overall performance of the program since the inception of that last summer, the total surcharges for this program is about $1.8 million. A half of that has accrued basically in this quarter 3 of 2024, which is precisely the time when we have the most participation of the entities in this program. This is indeed a reflection of not only the economic benefits, but also the reliability benefits, the operational benefits that the Western energy imbalance market can provide to the participating entities. That's all the material that I have. I will be happy to take any questions you may have.
Off of mute, unmute. Guillermo, thank you. Always appreciate these updates. This is one of the things we always look forward to, and understanding the details of how the benefits are accruing to all of the participants. Let me check and see if any of the governing body members have any questions or comments. I'm going to ask just to make certain. I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Yeah, I think you got two of them, John.
Oh,
and
okay, John, go ahead. Oh, there you are. Now I see you. Okay, please go ahead, John.
Okay, Thanks, Guillermo, for that presentation. I wanted to comment on that last slide. That's kind of a new one. It really gives us a good snapshot of how that tool that was added later in the market is useful and used. So thank you for that. Then I've got kind of a question for clarification. When I look at your slides, and you don't have to turn them back, but you go to the first few slides and you always have a stack of the market participants and how they performed or how they worked in the market for the quarter. And as I look at that list, that is a list of market participants. And I just want clarification. When I look at the Cal ISO, do you consider them to be a market participant? A little clarification there, I think, would be useful to help me understand how that works.
Yes, and there is always this context of how to refer to the participation of the market. I can tell you that we have 22 entities participating in the market, including the California ISO balancing area. And it happens that we have 23 balancing areas participating in the market because Pacific Corporation has specifically 2 different balancing areas. So typically we refer to 22 participants or 23 balancing areas. And yes, CAISO is part of that.
Can I just add to this? Sorry, Anna, let me just take this. So I realize that how that's characterized may create some confusion because the CAISO is a balancing area, and we are not a market participant in the sense that we, the CAISO, are as an organization are bidding or have assets that are profit motivation role here. It's our stakeholders or our participants, our load serving entities, our generators that are actually the ones participating and benefiting from the market. So I think going forward, we will clarify how we characterize this to make it clear that it's the CAISO footprint, but it is not CAISO as a market participant. We are a market operator, and being a market operator, we are explicitly excluded from being a market participant.
Yeah, thanks. That's very helpful. And I knew that, and but I look at these slides and sometimes that gets blurred, but I really appreciate, again, clarification of that.
Thank you, John. We had another hand raised.
Yeah, this is Andy. I had a question for Guillermo. Thank you. I liked the new slide. It definitely enjoyed sort of digesting all the information that's portrayed here very simply. Want to make sure I understand correctly. If it's a white square with a black dot, that means that entity had not opted into the Assistance Energy Program on a particular day, but did experience an RSE failure on that day?
That's correct.
Okay. And then also, are there a number of other entities that had RSE failures that never opted in to the program?
Yes, there are indeed other entities that may have failed the test, and they are not depicted here because they were not participating in the program at any time during the reported period. We only report for those that at least participated in one day in the quarter for this period.
Great. And just a reminder of the surcharges. When would someone be charged a surcharge, or what circumstance?
Yes. The settlement is a little bit complicated. Let me see if I can put it in simple terms. Effectively, once the entity has opted in and there is a condition in which it has failed, that is going to trigger the surcharges. Now, the surcharges are basically determined based on 2 conditions. The amount of the megawatt failure that the entity experienced in the test, or the amount of the additional transfer that it gained by not being limited in the real-time market. We take basically the maximum of either, and we apply that quantity to be priced at basically the bid cap of the $1,000. That is what determines the amount of the surcharge.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andy. And Guillermo, I've got one question for you, and it deals with your comments on slide 13. And you were explaining how the increase in exchanges occur as we have added market participants. And my question to you is, as we've added the participants and we've seen the increase in volumes, is it a result of the increased diversity in resources, the increase in diversity of load, the increase of transmission, or some blend of all three of those, and or something else?
I would say this is a combination of all these factors because all of them play a role in determining the economic realization of the transfers. Having different geographic and diversity is going to enable to move power when it's more beneficial for one area than another. If you have different fuel mix, that is going to create this economics of displacement. And if you have more areas, now you have more paths to be able to enable additional transfers. So it's a combination of all these factors together.
Excellent. Thank you. And Guillermo, Anita has questions for you.
Hi, Guillermo. Good job. I love this presentation. Going back to slide 7, or what, the last slide, I guess it is. Keep going. The last slide. So it must be 13. Oh, yeah, 13, 15, 15. Thank you. You know, just looking at PNM, can you speak to like what's going on there with PNM?
Yes, I can provide some color, Member Anita.
Thank you.
I can answer this question generally to not disclose any specific details of a participant area. Let me start first with some context because I think that is also important. Overall, all the entities participating in the market historically have a very high rate of passing the resource efficiency evaluation. We are typically talking about over 95% of the time, all the entities are able to pass the test. PNM in particular, the one that you are highlighting, is able to pass the test somewhere between 98 to 99% of the time. So we're really talking about 1-2% typical ranges of failures for the test. Now, we are reporting in this specific slide the conditions for the summer months. PNM, as is illustrated here, opted in most of the time for this quarter, and indeed had multiple days with resource efficiency failures. Now, I have to highlight that even though there is a dot representing a failure for a specific day, that only tells us that there was at least one interval in which there was a failure. But there are basically 96 intervals to assess in the day. It doesn't tell you how many intervals it failed for. It could be just as few as one. And that is just in the context of the test. Now, specific to the conditions that are highlighted for PNM, I have to say this is the summertime, the time of the year when areas tend to be naturally more constrained. There are tighter supply conditions, and it is the time when they are most likely to be exposed to failures of the test. In the end, the resource portfolio available from each area is really what defines how much exposure they have to fail the test. Generally, some areas are relatively small and can be more sensitive to failures if their resource mix is composed of relatively large resources. Changes to these large resources for a small area can be quite significant to absorb, and they don't have that much headroom. If we add on top of that, that some of those resources can be renewable resources that naturally are exposed to more variability, that exacerbates that a small headroom to maneuver when they have to pass the test. If we have resources that may represent 10, 20% of the size of the demand of the area, that is really what gets more conditions for these entities to be at the edge of failing or passing the test. Does that help to answer the question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Okay. I think Anita may have had a connection issue.
Oh,
Anita, did you have any more?
No, that was perfect. I appreciate that. I'm trying to get my hand down. There you go. Okay.
Yep. Thank you. With no further governing body member questions, let's move to public comment. Silas, if you could see if anybody in the public wants to make a comment.
If you would like to make a public comment, you can please press the raise hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Or if you are dialed into the phone line, you can press #2 on your telephone keypad to enter the comment queue. I'm not seeing any hands up in the comment queue at this time.
Okay, thank you. We will move on. And the next agenda item is 7, which is our WEM market expert opinion on storage bid cost recovery. And to introduce the topic and our market expert, I'm going to defer to Andy Campbell.
Thank you, Chair Kanzioka. And as the chair just described, we're going to be hearing from Susan Pope. We're going to hear her opinion on the storage bid cost recovery. There mentioned there will be an opportunity for public comment. Her opinion was posted earlier this week, and hopefully folks have had some time to review that. And we're going to be hearing a presentation for her. We'll have opportunity for members to ask questions and also, as I mentioned, public comment. I'll turn it over to Susan.
Good afternoon, Member Campbell, Chair Kanzioka, governing body members, stakeholders, executives, and staff of the California ISO. Next slide, please. I have a fairly long presentation to cover today, so I'm going to move along pretty quickly, but please feel free to stop me with questions at any time. I'll begin by presenting my opinion on the final proposal before the governing body, and then move on to describe what is meant by unwarranted storage bid cost recovery as the basis for summarizing my opinion on the pros and cons of the final proposal. The presentation concludes with a few observations on the process for this initiative and some suggestions for track. Next slide, please. I support the California ISO proposal to modify the formulas used to calculate bid cost recovery for storage resources as described in Section 7 of the final proposal. The rest of this page and the following page summarize my understanding of the proposal for clarity about the proposed market design changes upon which I'm opining. First, the proposal would modify the bid cost recovery calculation for storage resources in all intervals of the real-time market. This includes all intervals in which a storage resource sells incremental energy, including those in which it sells back a day-ahead charging schedule, intervals in which a storage resource buys incremental energy, including those in which it buys back a day-ahead discard charge schedule, and intervals without day-ahead market schedules. Next slide, please. Secondly, the proposal would substitute a proxy for the real-time 15-minute market bid or real-time dispatch bid in the current formulas for calculating storage BCR. I'm not going to go through the formulas here, assuming you've seen them several times before. They're complicated, and they're 4 versions of basically the same kind of formula. The third element of the proposal is that the bid cost recovery paid for the real-time market would be the sum of the bid cost recovery profits or losses calculated for each interval of the day. This element of the proposal is not a change from the current market rules. So I've gone through that pretty quickly just to summarize my understanding of the proposal that I'm opining on, because as you all know, this was a rapidly evolving initiative where the proposals changed fairly rapidly over time. And I wanted to just make it really clear up front that these are the characteristics of the proposal that I'm going to be opining on. And I'll be talking a lot more about these elements going forward. So don't be worried if you didn't understand all the things I just said. So next slide, please. So this slide summarizes the primary takeaways of the presentation. And while it's useful to have it up front here as an executive summary, I think when you're reading the presentation, after using this slide on a couple of prior presentations, I've decided for the purposes of my verbal presentation, I'm going to skip this slide now and circle back to it in my concluding remarks. Next slide, please. So there's broad agreement about the need to assess and improve bidding, scheduling, and settlement rules for storage resources. It's a large and important issue, and for that reason, the California ISO has divided it into two tracks. The current proposal addresses the first track, which the California ISO has defined as addressing two specific concerns. Concern one is that storage assets are not exposed to real-time prices for deviating from their day-ahead schedules. Concern two is that storage assets are incentivized to bid strategically to maximize the combined bid cost recovery and market payments they receive from other service sources during the course of a day. So you'll notice that track one addresses payments that are inconsistent with the established intent of bid cost recovery, as we discussed in last month's public briefing. I've included two statements from last month's presentation that are relevant to today's discussion. First, BCR payments are made to provide suppliers with the assurance that they won't lose money by following dispatch instructions. For example, they're made to align a resource operator's incentives with an out-of-merit dispatch that's occurred because of a system reliability need. The second point is that bid cost recovery is not intended to compensate suppliers for operational difficulties that are preventing them from meeting their day-ahead schedules. So the BCR is applied to all other types of resources, does not compensate them when they're out of service or derated or for some other reason can't meet their day-ahead schedules. Next slide, please. So a very active stakeholder process over the last 2 or 3 months revealed the difficulty of expeditiously resolving both concerns of track one. BCR payments that are made to resources can occur under a number of different conditions. Some BCR payments are warranted under certain conditions. Some are being paid when they're not needed to incentivize efficient or reliable operation, but they're not being paid because a storage resource operator has bid strategically. There's a final set of BCR payments that are being paid because of a strategic bidding that has inflated the magnitude of the BCR payments. So there's 3 different things going on here. So the problem with resolving track one quickly turned out to be the lack of a process at hand or an easy, ready way to identify warranted versus unwarranted bid cost recovery. The California ISO simply wasn't able to find a way to quickly and easily identify unwarranted BCR payments. As a result, the final proposal is a near-term fix for concern 2 only, and the California ISO is starting an initiative to holistically improve bidding, scheduling, and settlements for storage resources. I don't know if that's already been talked about today. Maybe that's coming up next in the review of the California initiatives. Next slide, please. So to understand the final proposal and my support for it, I think it's helpful if I can be clear about the drivers of unwarranted BCR. There are three primary drivers under the current market rules. The first driver is that storage resources are paid bid cost recovery in intervals in which their schedules are constrained by their state of charge. This has been explained at length in California ISO papers and presentations. The payments are made when state of charge is the payments that are made when state of charge is binding appear to be an artifact of applying BCR rules designed for thermal resources to storage, and show that there's a need to revise the BCR recovery rule, the BCR rules, to account for the operational constraints that storage resources have that thermal resources don't have. Thermal resources don't have, in other words, state of charge and perhaps some other aspects of unique to storage resources. So when state of charge for storage resources bind, they can't be scheduled in real time consistently with their day-ahead schedules, with their base schedules or their day-ahead ancillary services schedules. And they're being paid under the current rules as if the deviation from these day-ahead schedules was at the request of the system operator to improve economics or efficiency. So the bid cost recovery payment is being calculated and paid under the incorrect assumption that the storage resources need to be paid in order to not lose money to hold the dispatch schedules they've been assigned. They would not otherwise voluntarily follow their dispatch schedules. But this isn't the case. The storage resources can't follow the schedules because they're constrained by their state of charge. So payment of BCR when state of charge is binding, in other words, when driver one has occurred, can occur without strategic bidding. A storage unit might be offering into the market at its best estimate of its opportunity cost and receive unwarranted BCR just because of driver one. So I think that's important to note that it's not all of these payments are occurring because of strategic bidding. Next slide, please. So a second driver of unwarranted BCR is it's possible to change real-time bids and offers for intervals when the state of charge will be binding in order to increase the BCR payments. So the illustration on the left-hand side of the page is intended to illustrate how this happens. And note that the strategic bidding shown here is really, you can view it as simply profit maximizing behavior under the incentives of the current market rules. So this picture is of a situation in which the supplier has to buy back its day-ahead schedule at real-time prices. So what's happened is that the supplier does not have sufficient state of charge to inject the amount of energy into the system that it's scheduled to inject in its day-ahead schedule. So in the picture, I haven't labeled it here, the vertical height, assume that this is dollars or prices or offers. So that's the vertical dimension here. And assume the horizontal dimension is, the width of that is the number of megawatts that a supplier is scheduled to produce that day, but can't produce because of a state of charge constraint. So focusing on the top segment of the bar, this shows the normal buyback situation without any strategic bidding. Here, a resource, storage or otherwise, is scheduled in real time at an offer less than the real-time price. So you can see the real-time price labeled up at the top of the bar, and the normal offer is below that. So because the offer is less than the real-time price, under the optimized dispatch, it's being scheduled to produce incremental energy or it's being scheduled to produce less energy in real time. And under the market rules, it has to pay the real-time price to buy back its day-ahead schedule. It loses money on this buyback. A thermal resource would have produced the schedule. The offer here is for less than the cost of buying it back, which is the real-time price. Or in the case of a storage resource, the opportunity cost of selling is less than the cost of buying back the day-ahead schedule. Both of these situations impose a loss on the supplier. They'd like to produce, but they can't. They have to buy out at the real-time price because they can't produce. And so the BCR is being paid under normal circumstances to compensate for the losses that these resources are incurring to follow a real-time schedule less than the day-ahead schedule and incentivize them to perform according to the real-time dispatch schedule. So I want to stop there and see if anybody has any questions. Okay. So this all works as designed when the real-time offer is an actual offer reflecting marginal costs or the supplier's best estimate of opportunity costs in that interval. But when storage resources have no remaining state of charge, there's an incentive for strategic bidding. So what the second and middle bar shows is that there's an incentive for them to decrease their offer when they know the state of charge will be binding and they'll be buying back. Because the bid cost recovery is calculated as the difference between the real-time price and their offer, they can be paid this additional BCR shown in the middle kind of section of the bar with kind of gradient shading. This is the additional unwarranted BCR they can be paid by lowering their offer in an interval when they know their state of charge is going to be binding. I know this kind of seems strange and counterintuitive, but this is what is happening under the current market rules. An analogous picture and explanation could be done for a sellback situation, but I think you just need to kind of work through the buyback situation and understand the sellback situation is just the mirror image. Any questions before I move on? Okay, next slide, please. So driver 3 of unwarranted BCR is that there's also a possible incentive to modify bids and offers in prior intervals to actually cause the state of charge to bind in a later interval and trigger bid cost recovery. So the state of charge constraint can be triggered by shifting charging or discharging to earlier intervals. And that's what the illustration on the left-hand side of this page is intended to show. It's supposed to show how unwarranted BCR buyback payments can be triggered by shifting battery discharge to a prior interval that is needed to meet a day-ahead schedule in a later interval. In this interval, what happens is that the supplier decreases its offer to sell in the prior interval. So the lower offer means that it's dispatched to a higher level. So there's an increase in its real-time schedule in that prior interval because it's offered to sell for a lower price. So it's selling more than its day-ahead schedule in the prior interval. But then as a result, it doesn't have the energy that it needs to meet its day-ahead schedule in the later interval. So there's in this what's labeled as the binding SOC interval, the state of charge binds, and the supplier is going to have to buy back its day-ahead schedule. So it's then in a buyback situation in which it can strategically bid, as I just described under driver 2, to increase its bid cost recovery payment by lowering its bid in that buyback interval. Next slide, please. So this slide is a continuation of the explanation of driver 3. The prior slide shows that it's possible to cause the state of charge to bind by shifting the charging and discharging between intervals. This present slide makes the point that there's a cost to modifying bids and offers to make this happen, and that this cost factors into the profitability of strategically bidding to increase bid cost recovery. The illustration addresses the fact that in order to increase the real-time schedule in the prior interval, the bidder has to decrease its real-time offer below the real-time price in that interval. Now, if its real-time offer really is below the real-time price in the prior interval, then it's a case when this incremental real-time schedule shown in the kind of the the box with the hatched outline, is economic. It should be dispatched for more. It's not the result of strategic bidding, because its real-time opportunity cost as its bid is less than the real-time price. Strategic bidding occurs when the real-time offer is decreased below estimated opportunity cost in this prior interval in order to cause the supplier to be scheduled to produce incremental energy in the prior interval. So the amount by which the offer is decreased below estimated opportunity cost is an implicit loss to the supplier that's strategically bidding. So it's losing money because it is bidding less than its opportunity cost. Imagine this is a thermal unit. It's bidding less than its cost. It's being dispatched up. It's being paid a real-time price that's less than its actual cost. It's losing money. The problem is that by lowering this bid, there's an implicit profit that it appears to be earning. The difference between its lower bid and the actual real-time price appears as a profit from the perspective of the accounting of what the supplier has earned on its real-time schedule. This profit is the difference between the real-time price and the lower real-time offer. I kind of have that in an equation form there. And what happens with the way that the BCR settlements work is that these profits reduce the total BCR payments for the day, because the total BCR payments for the day are the sum of the losses and the profits calculated under that BCR equation in each interval. So in some intervals, there are going to be losses, like we just talked about, can occur in intervals when the state of charge binds. But here, what you can get is when a supplier bids to strategically cause that state of charge to bind, it can earn some sort of phantom profits. So the CAISO spreadsheets and the MSC paper go through these calculations in detail to show how the profitability of this third driver depends on the level of the offer in the prior interval that's needed to modify the prior interval dispatch schedule. Next page, please. So the proposal put forward in the final proposal put forward in this initiative has aimed to diffuse the drivers of bid cost recovery described here. So the initial California ISO proposal addressed driver one by attempting to disallow BCR when state of charge is binding. If this had been feasible to do, it would have addressed both concerns 1 and concerns 2 of track 1, sorry. But this wasn't pursued because of a concern about being able to identify binding intervals, given how multi-interval optimization schedules storage resources. Yes, John, you have a question.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. Just real quick before you get into the proposed solution. So the way I'm thinking about this, and thanks for your guidance, is that the way the rules are now, an entity could do strategic bidding and get unwarranted bid cost recovery. And I understand that, but I guess if those rules are out there and somebody was in good faith bidding into the system, they could also get, I guess you'd call it unwarranted bid cost recovery, and the market would be inefficient. In other words, that inefficiency could happen without any untoward behavior. Is that right?
So really the inefficiency is going to be occurring if there is a modification of bids and offers away from the storage operator's best estimate of opportunity cost as a result of the incentive to earn higher bid cost recovery. So to put it another way, John, the presence of unwarranted BCR doesn't indicate inefficiency. So that's what I was saying. You could get unwarranted BCR just under driver 1, bidding your best estimate of your costs. You could get under unwarranted BCR. So because you're bidding your best estimate of costs, that's the data that the California ISO has when it dispatches its system. So it has the best data out there. It doesn't have torqued or tweaked or strategically manipulated data that it's using when it's trying to achieve least cost operation of the system. It has the best data out there, but there can still be unwarranted BCR.
Okay.
Okay. Good question. So back here to page, I can't see the page number here. So the proposals put forward attempt to address these different drivers. As I said, the first proposal would have been really nice if it had been possible, because it would have addressed both concerns, but it proved to not, the California ISO didn't feel that it could identify intervals when state of charge is binding because of multi-interval optimization. So moving on to the second bullet, subsequent proposals by both the California ISO and stakeholders have been to replace the real-time bid variable in the bid cost recovery formula. So there have been a number of proposals and some evolution in understanding them. And I think those are pretty well discussed in both the California ISO documents, and the MSC paper does a really thorough job of sort of hashing out the pros and cons of some of the different alternatives that have been put forward. Third bullet, the final proposal addresses the third driver and reflects, the final proposal reflects general agreement around an equation which is called a joint stakeholder proposal to replace the near term, in the near term, the real-time bid with a proxy as a near-term fix. So now onto the third bullet. The final California ISO proposal goes one step further to address driver 3 by applying the revised bid cost recovery formula in all real-time intervals. And the reason why this is helpful is it reduces the profitability and the incentive for strategic bidding to increase BCR, because it takes into account the phantom losses or phantom cost reductions from prior periods and reduces BCR payments by that amount. New slide, please. So in my view, the advantages of the final proposal support moving forward with it at this time. The proposal will substantially reduce the ability to increase bid cost recovery through strategic bidding. It caps the amount of BCR calculated for intervals when the state of charge may be binding by substituting proxy variables not controlled by the bidder. Despite this capping, the proposal does not appear to me to reduce warranted BCR. I think this is an important point. Secondly, the final proposal also reduces the incentive to increase cost BCR by strategically bidding in prior periods, as we just discussed. Bidders incur losses or phantom cost reductions in prior periods if they try to strategically bid in order to trigger the state of charge constraint. By applying the formulas in the final proposal to all intervals, it limits the ability of suppliers to bid so as to reduce the size of these losses in the prior period strategic bidding. And finally, because the proposal is applied in all intervals, these losses can't be avoided. For example, they are going to be counted even for intervals without damp schedules. Next slide, please. The final big advantage of the final proposal is that the California ISO has stated that it could be implemented quickly. This is important because it will address a strategic bidding strategy that's not that difficult to implement and is publicly known. There's basically a hole in the market rules that's been exposed and could cost ratepayers an unknown amount of money. So it needs to be stopped, I think, even without full analysis of how big the problem has been or might become. Next slide, please. The disadvantages of the final proposal appear to be limited, speculative, or infeasible to be addressed quickly. First, the final proposal reduces but does not eliminate unwarranted bid cost recovery or the potential for strategic bidding. There's still room around the edges of this proposal for strategic bidding, but it really, really significantly reduces them. The MSC has discussed some alternatives, but I think these would take some time to think through. In the end, I agree with them and with, as they've stated, and with the California ISO, that there don't appear to be advantages to working any further to refine the current proposal at this point in time. Secondly, the potential magnitude and circumstances of unwarranted BCR payments hasn't been thoroughly investigated. You know, I found that the methodology for some of the data analysis was unclear. It was difficult to understand what the results established about the degree to which there has been strategic bidding and the magnitude of the strategic bidding, or how large the payments might be in the future. So I won't say any more on that because I'm starting to run short on time here. Next slide, please. So a third disadvantage is that the possible impacts of the proposal on bids and offers hasn't been fully thought through. And I especially think that's true for WEM only entities. One of the things that has to be done anytime you make a market design change is to really think hard about market reaction to that market design change. In other words, it's important not to assume that after you make the market rule change that stakeholders are continuing to bid and offer just like they do today. So I think that's a piece where a little more thought could be done. I'm not really terribly concerned about it. I think I'm pretty satisfied that the proposed rule is sound, but I think a little more thought could be given to what this, what the reaction might be in terms of change in bids and offers. And then circling back, I think the last disadvantage is that the final proposal doesn't address the concern of storage resources not being exposed to real-time prices for deviating from day-ahead schedules. I just want to add my own weight here to what's already been stated, which is that it's important for storage resources to have correct incentives to bid and offer to manage their state of charge, because it increases market efficiency and reliability. The real-time market look-ahead window is only 2 hours in the FMM and 1 hour in the real-time dispatch. So, sorry, I have to dismiss my timer here. The RTD in the real-time market multi-interval software can't manage storage over a 24-hour day. So this has to be done with the bids and offers from the storage operators. Next slide, please. So I've witnessed, and I just want to say that I certainly appreciate the efforts of the California ISO, the Department of Market Monitoring, and stakeholders to move quickly with this initiative. At the same time, I just like to observe that it was clear from the comments of some stakeholders that they had difficulty tracking the evolution of the proposal. And I think the pace of the initiative made it difficult for the CAISO and for the DMM to provide well-documented analyses to help evaluate the issue and the various proposals. I'd also like to end with a high-level suggestion that Track 2 start with a clear definition of the circumstances under which bid cost recovery is warranted versus unwarranted, and thoroughly address all the technical details and complications in these definitions so that they don't interfere with subsequent discussions. And then apply these definitions consistently in all subsequent analyses to clearly show what payments are warranted versus not warranted. So I'll stop here, and I'm happy to go back and talk about slide 5 if anyone, the summary slide, if anyone would like me to. So thank you, and I'm happy to take questions from the governing body.
Susan, thank you for this presentation and going through your key points. very illustrative, and this has been, as you noted, a challenge and uncovering an issue that needed to be addressed, moved quickly, and then as the stakeholder process went through it, recognized that it was more complicated than could be handled as originally thought. And so now there is this balancing here. I'm going to go to the governing body members to see if they have any questions for you. So, Christina, if you could help me on the raised hand feature.
Yeah, it looks like Andy has his hand raised.
All right, thank you, Andy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Kanzioka. Thank you, Dr. Pope. And I mostly wanted to just reiterate what Rob said, thanking you for producing this opinion and pretty quick turnaround given the pace of the initiative. And I especially appreciate the kind of going forward suggestions about the sort of analysis and kind of framing of the problem that would be very helpful in the next stage. That definitely, those things resonate with me. And I just wanted to thank you for preparing this. That'll help us as we complete our deliberations before our meeting tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Christina, are there any other hands raised?
I don't see any at this time.
Thank you. Susan, I've got one question, and it's kind of implicit or implied in your recommendation. But as you went through this material, it's clear that there is a need to act quickly. Then as the stakeholder group looked at this, there were a range of approaches that could be done. You could make it more complete, which takes more time, and then leave maybe less at the tail end, scale it back to be able to move more quickly, and then kind of in between. And so, there was a range of approaches. And basically, since you are providing an opinion that you believe that the outcome here is reasonable, you find that was a good balancing act, in your opinion, in finding what should be done now and what should be left for later. Is that correct?
Right. I think so. I think, this unfortunately turned out to be, a harder nut to crack, I think, than maybe the California ISO originally thought it would be, based on its initial proposal. And I have to say, I don't agree with the proposal to entirely get rid of bid cost recovery for storage resources, because some of it is warranted. And we want storage resources to bid flexibly, especially those that might not be required to for some reason or another. So I worry about any proposal that might tend to reduce flexible bidding into the markets. So I wouldn't support completely eliminating BCR, but something had to be done. And I think this proposal has the advantage, it appears to me, that it preserves warranted BCR. And it has the disadvantage that it has some wiggle room for continued strategic bidding. But I don't know that wiggle room is really very large. I mean, I think that's something that could be assessed or at least tracked. But I think that it's small enough to say, okay, let's just turn the page right now. And as I think pretty much everyone has said, I think Western Power Trading Forum said it, MSC said it, California ISO has said it, it's time to step back and look at storage resources holistically. They have some characteristics that are really very different than thermal resources. And there's a need to step back and look at how do we design bidding, scheduling, and settlement rules for them that are really going to encourage their flexible participation in this market. without leaving, holes for strategic bidding. And there's a possibility that the end result could be something completely different than a further revision of this equation. There could be something very different that comes out of the more holistic initiative. And I think it's time to do that.
Okay, Susan, thank you. I had a follow-up question, but you already answered it as part of your response. And that's why I appreciate that. And that had to do with when it goes into this next step or next track, that it may uncover that further modifications may be required to address this in a manner that really meets all the objectives. So I appreciate your remarks on that. Susan, if you could hold on, we need to go to public comment. So Silas, if we can go to the lines and see if there are any public comments to be made.
If you'd like to make a public comment, please press the raise hand icon on Zoom or #2 on the phone line. Okay, no hands are up in the queue at this time.
Silas, thank you. And Susan, thank you again.
You're very welcome.
So we will move on in our agenda. Our next item is the briefing on policy initiatives and the WEM GB planning calendar. With us to start off will be, once again, Anna McKenna, our Vice President. Anna?
Well, good afternoon again. And I have the pleasure of introducing Becky Robinson, our Director of Market Policy and Development, and she'll be walking you through the policy initiatives and planning calendar. Becky?
Thank you, Anna. Good afternoon, Chair Kanzioka, Vice Chair Wagner, and members of the governing body. Here today to talk you through updates related to our policy initiatives. If you go to the next slide, please. Perfect. Thank you. So first up on our extended day-ahead market and day-ahead market enhancements item, as you know, our tariff is fully approved and we are working towards implementing in 2026. Since we last met, we have filed at FERC tariff revisions related to inter-SC trades in the Western Energy Imbalance Market and the extended day-ahead market. This is an item that you approved at our last meeting in Tempe. So we are awaiting a FERC response to that, and we'll update you when that comes through. Also, you'll recall that back in July, we held our first day-ahead market enhancements implementation sort of stakeholder meeting to set expectations about sort of timeline and engagement with stakeholders on working through those tunable parameters. And we received stakeholder feedback following that meeting, and we've been working through that feedback, fleshing out the details for our plan for how we expect to engage stakeholders there. We expect to have sort of a public response to that in the coming week or weeks. But I think, and we'll have a call with stakeholders to talk through that. But I think that'll be a good data point to check in terms of how we'll be working through that with stakeholders. And if we can go to the next slide, this is the timeline we had originally put out back in July for that meeting. It's a little small to see, but if you see the 3 blue diamonds to the right of the page, those were the stakeholder meetings we had proposed to have. And I think, based on some of the feedback, we may try and have some additional meetings and starting sooner so that those are happening as we, are into 2025 and working towards 2026 launch. All right, so on to the next item on resource efficiency evaluation enhancements. We are kicking off our phase 3 effort on the Western Energy Imbalance Market resource efficiency and evaluation enhancements. We will be releasing some analysis looking over the past year And actually in my colleague Guillermo's presentation earlier, you got a bit of a preview of some of that. That analysis will be setting the stage for enhancements that we'll be talking about with stakeholders. That analysis is looking at the assistance energy transfers, how that program has been used, what we see from that, whether it's working well as is, or what we take from how it's been used, as well as performance of BAs passing the resource sufficiency evaluation test, including how the uncertainty requirement is playing into that. So we will be, we'll start by, sharing that analysis. I expect that'll be released again in the coming weeks, and requesting stakeholder input on these problem statements and thinking about what are the enhancements, if any, that stakeholders are interested in seeing out of the resource sufficiency evaluation.
Becky, you have a question?
Becky? Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I guess on this one, what sort of things will be included in that analysis?
So it is really looking at so the chart that Guillermo had in his slides, where you see how many entities are opting in to the assistance energy transfers, as well as the dots showing the failures. I think the analysis. I shouldn't say we. It's Guillermo and his team, but it is thinking through, for instance, today we have a de minimis threshold of 1%. So if we're looking at how often are entities failing the resource sufficiency evaluation, thinking about, is that 1% sort of de minimis threshold, does that seem like it's, of the failures we see, how many is that preventing versus, how many would you see if you didn't have that? What would the failures look like if you had a different de minimis threshold? So things like that. But I don't want to steal the thunder of that analysis, which should be coming out. There will be a sort of a full paper around that, which should be a good read. All right, we could go to the next slide. So next up on price formation enhancements. You'll recall that in September, we published a discussion paper outlining next steps on our 3 big topics under this price formation enhancements umbrella: scarcity pricing, BAA level market power mitigation, and fast start pricing. We did get comments on sort of our plan that we published as part of that discussion paper. And, in response, we've done some tightening up of the schedule that we had originally put out. I think, we wanted to convey and heard from some stakeholders that, we had put out kind of a fairly long timeline for working through these issues, which are, I would say meaty and complex. But we heard from stakeholders that, was that timeline really conveying that these are priority issues? I think these are priority issues, and I think we want to be very clear on that. And so we've tightened up the timelines to be responsive to that feedback and try and make more meaningful progress on all of these topics in a shorter timeline. And so we are moving, all 3 of these topics into the policy design stage, shifting towards developing detailed proposals on these topics. We are kind of pairing up the first 2 on scarcity pricing and BA level market power mitigation. And fast start pricing will be a separate track, but all of these topics are moving, if you will, moving forward. Again, we're trying to sort of sustain momentum on all 3 of those topics, recognizing that there's some issues in all of these that we need to work through and make sure that we're sort of carefully thinking through what are the implications of any design changes. Those working groups, it says here, will begin November. We actually had one this morning on market power mitigation, and those will be sort of continuing on a regular cadence going forward. All right, we could go to the next slide. So on greenhouse gas coordination, this working group, the work is continuing here. We've got a working group next week to continue these discussions. We are continuing the work on GHG accounting for state policies without a price on carbon. And so we're working on an issue paper to be published later this month or maybe next month on looking to design policy on this accounting and reporting approach, which would happen sort of after the market, but it be a means of providing some rigor around various entities using market information in terms of their compliance with various GHG programs. And also we are continuing conversations on GHG information and metrics. So in addition to our average GHG emissions rates, there will be some additional metrics that become available sort of falling out of this accounting and reporting approach that we're sort of working through policy design on, and also continuing the review of with stakeholders of the GHG design in both the energy imbalance market and extended day ahead market.
Becky, Member Campbell has his hand raised.
Yep.
Sure, go ahead.
Question, and maybe that last bullet was answering my question, but so one, I wanted to just note there was a nice blog in the blog post in the CAISO blog about the GHG process and what's going on there. So I see that the accounting and reporting approach is being pursued more specifically. Is the kind of the in-market constraint-based approach, some of the other ideas, are those also still in scope for this initiative?
I would say we had initially, that's a great question. So we had initially sort of had that side by side, if you will, with the accounting and reporting approach, and kind of said, you know, to stakeholders, which of these are you more interested in, or are you interested in both? The sense that we got was that the feedback we got was that there was more, say, immediate interest in the accounting and reporting approach from a market participant perspective. But we have heard that there may well be interest in an in-market solution, right? Where you're sort of, where you want the market to influence the dispatch, you know, in light of these non-price GHG policies, where you want to sort of, to me, it's a question of, are you trying to change the dispatch, or are you just trying to sort of rationalize the market outcomes on the one hand versus the other? But so I would say we haven't taken that off the table, the in-market approach, but I will say that there was less sort of active immediate interest from stakeholders. But we did hear, for instance, from an Oregon commissioner that that this may be something that's needed prior to a 2030 date for some of their goals in Oregon. So I think we will continue to sort of to monitor that, and it's not sort of the thing that the working group is most actively engaged on right now, but it could certainly come back up. Great question. And in other news, in case you didn't see, just related to our GHG work, there was in the state of Washington, there was an initiative on the ballot about their Cap and Invest program. The news out of that is that Washington will continue to have a Cap and Invest program going forward. So we will continue to have the you know, the interesting challenges of working with you know, the many state programs that we have around GHG in the West. All right, next up, gas resource management. We are working towards publishing an issue paper later this quarter, likely in December. It will have a detailed discussion of prior policy development efforts that have resulted in our existing existing rules around gas resource market participation. It'll also have a significant discussion of the working group problem statements in the context of potential design enhancements. So stay tuned for that, and expect to see that again later this year. Next slide, please. Congestion revenue rights. We have kicked off a policy initiative on congestion revenue rights. We've got a stakeholder meeting on the calendar, I believe, next week. and we'll be publishing a paper shortly to kind of feed the discussion there. This is on the heels of the discussions at the Regional Issues Forum, which you heard about earlier today. And really this is, I would say this is two kind of motivators on our part, in addition to the RIF discussions. First is that there were a number of catalog proposals on congestion revenue rights. And so this will be a forum to kind of allow all of those to, have some consideration in stakeholder discussions. It's also just simply a follow-up to some reforms that the California ISO did back in the 2018 timeframe, which were designed to kind of resolve some of the observed inefficiencies with the CRR auction. And as part of that, we committed to continue to assess the impacts of the proposals as we put them in place, and consider more comprehensive changes to the CRR allocation and auction design if needed. And so I think we will be, those will be robust conversations, I'm sure, and look forward to getting into those with stakeholders and having more to say on that in the coming months. Next slide, please. So I think that wraps it up for the items that we had teed up to discuss. We do have informational updates on transmission services and market scheduling priorities and resource adequacy, if there's any questions on those or anything you'd like to discuss on those.
Becky, let's first see if there's any questions from the governing body. And again, Christine, if you could help me out, if there's any raised hands.
Yes. I don't see any hands yet.
Okay, thank you. Becky, really thorough overview. And I think we've gotten a little bit of a cadence with the material and the level of detail and the questions that you've been getting from us. So that's all very helpful. And I think that's getting us to the point to where we appreciate the material as presented, and it's really hitting us in the right balance between detail and overview. I do have one comment to make. I'm really, pleased to see the efforts on CRRs. I think it'll help clear up a lot of things. I don't know, what that outcome will be, but just the fact that you have the initiative and it's, going to address where we are today and maybe where it should be and determine if changes are needed. So kudos and having this included. Let's go to Becky. We're going to go to public comment. Silas, if we can see if there are any public comments that are out there.
If you'd like to make a public comment, please press the raise hand icon on Zoom or #2 on your phone. Not seeing any hands raised in the comment queue.
Okay, thank you. We will move on. Governing body members, are there any questions on any of the informational reports that are included in the package?
Rob, just a quick comment. This is John.
Yep.
Just want to let whoever produces that budget report know that we do look at it. I look at it. There's good information there. So just a recognition and a thank you.
Yeah, John, always a good point. There's a lot of material, and staff does a great job of preparing it and including it. And, when it's really well done and it's as expected, then we don't need to, drill down. But yeah, John, thank you. And then governing body, item 10 is our future agenda items. Any unique or new future agenda items to be included?
I don't see any. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, hearing none, we are done, and this concludes our meeting. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and we will see most of you hopefully tomorrow. So take care and thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Chair Conzio. Nice job today.
All right.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye, everyone.